Hello everyone, I am Anissa Koiriani, and today I would like to present my research about the coexistence of good and evil in Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. So let's start with the chapter 1, which is Introduction. The first is background of the study. Nowadays, minorities all over the world experience racial discrimination. Racism is the most crucial problem in every multicultural society, even in a so-called melting pot country like the United States. The group who suffer the most for racial discrimination is African American people. Racism takes many forms and can happen in many places. It includes prejudice, discrimination, or hatred directed at someone because of their color, ethnicity, and national origin. Racism can be expressed from people's action and attitudes toward minority. One of the expressions is racial prejudice that formed in the society gradually. The society see the minority as a nuisance for the harmony in their life. Not often the minority experience injustice just because they are minority. The racial discrimination has been one of the topics that used by many writers in their novels. The purpose is to criticize the system of racial discrimination that applied in the society and how people absorb in and do not know how to differentiate the good and the evil. The authors want to send the message to the reader that there are minorities who are harmed by arbitrary action of the majority. One of the authors is Harper Lee with her novel entitled To Kill a Mockingbird. Nell Harper Lee, known as Harper Lee, was a novelist who only published two books in her lifetime. Her first book, To Kill a Mockingbird, published in 1960, won the Pulitzer Prize only a year after it was published and is widely taught in schools in the United States with lessons that emphasize tolerance and decry prejudice. The story in To Kill a Mockingbird is what Lee herself saw in her childhood in Monroeville, Alabama. Her experience inspired Lee to write her novel, To Kill a Mockingbird. The condition of that era shows the racial prejudice of the society towards black people. How an innocent black people is punished for something that he does not commit. The judge still accused him even though the evidence is not strong enough to punish him just because he is a black people. The story is delivered by perspective of two kids named Scout and Jam. They are daughter and son of a widower lawyer in the area. With a friend named Dill, the children feed one another's imagination with rumors about their neighbor who never go out from his house. The curious of his appearance, reason why he remained hiding, and they fantasize about how to get him out of his house. As time goes by, Scouts and James' innocent point of views are exposed by the fact that good and evil coexist in their society. They usually attend the trial when their father on duty defending his clients. They admire how the justice works in the court. It seems awesome for them to know how people reveal the truth and how the truth wins. They witness the innocent people is accused because the racial prejudice that thinks that black people more suspicious to commit a crime. Because their father is the lawyer of the case, their family got an unpleasant treatment from the community. From this, Scouts and James' perspective about good and evil gradually changed. Therefore, the writer is interested to analyze the coexistence of good and evil from the character's perspective. And then the second is statement of the problem. They are the first is how is the coexistence of good and evil portrayed in the Scout and James perspective in Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. And the second is how the Scout and James perspective of the coexistence of good and evil influence their character development. And then the objective of the study. They are the first is to find out the coexistence of good and evil portrayed in the Scouts and James perspective in Harper Lee To Kill a Mockingbird. And then the second is to understand the influence of Scouts and James perspective of coexistence of good and evil for their character development. And then the fourth is the scope of the problem. The source of data analysis in the research is taken from Harper Lee To Kill a Mockingbird. The major discussion of this research explores the coexistence of good and evil and how the coexistence of good and evil influence the character development of Scouts and James perspective. The writer chooses the perspective of Scout and Jem because they are children who have little understanding about good and evil. However, they still have strict definition about what good is and what evil is without influence from many things. Later, Scouts and James' character development also interested to be discussed because we can see how injustice changed their perspective about good and evil. And then the last is significance of the study. The purpose of this study is to understand the coexistence of good and evil. Besides, the reader can find out how a perspective of good and evil can be changed from Scouts and James' perspective in Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. The findings of this research are expected to provide clear explanation about the influence of coexistence of good and evil toward character development in this novel. The writer also hopes that this research can be a reference for the readers to know more about the existence of good and evil, especially in Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. Hopefully, this research can be useful as a reference and supplementary information for other researchers in the same field related to the existence of good and evil and also character development in the future. So the second chapter is theoretical review. And then the review of related theories. The first theory I use is the theory of character development by Erikson. Erikson promoted 8 stages of psychosocial development. They are infancy, early childhood, preschool age, school age, adolescent, young adult, adulthood, and mature age. But in this research, the writer only used the first 4 stages because the story ended when the character is in the age of 11. So the first is infancy. It is when children develop trust or mistrust. And then the second is early childhood. It is when the children develop autonomy or shame and doubt. And then the third is preschool age. It is about initiative and guilt. And then the fourth is school age. It is about industry versus inferiority. In the fourth stage, teacher in the school has a big role for students' character development. The second theory is the theory of post-structuralism. It is the theory by Foucault in 1976. You can read it by yourself. It is a post-structuralism recognizes the power of discourse to shape reality, both perception of reality and the concrete reality that is perceived. And then the third theory is the theory of binary opposition. Binary opposition is a concept introduced by de Saussure. It is often encountered in cultural studies when exploring the relationship between different groups of people, for instance, upper class and lower class, or disabled or non-disabled. On the surface, they seem like mere identifying labels, but what makes them binary opposite is the notion that they cannot coexist. And then the last theory is the theory of good and evil. So, good means a lack of self-centeredness. It can be defined as the ability to empathize with other people, to feel compassion for them, and to put their needs before your own. Good is very closely related to justice. Based on roles define it is as social arrangement and good based on their contribution to justice. It defines justice as fairness, especially in distributing social goods, and attempt to prove that just institutions and lives are good if rational individuals' good are considered fairly. While evil is any bad state of affairs, wrongful action, or character flaw, Nietzsche considered evil as the concept which is very dangerous because it has a negative effect on human potential and vitality by promoting the weak in spirit and suppressing the strong. And then the research framework. To Kill a Mockingbird is an interesting novel written by Harper Lee. The story deals with perspective of good and evil and the reality that happen in the society. In this novel, Harper Lee wants to show that sometimes the concept of good and evil is different from what really happened. The first problem is the way that coexistence of good and evil portrayed in the perspective of two main characters, Scott and Jem. The problem will be analyzed by using the theory of post-structuralism and binary opposition, while the second problem is the influence of the character's perspective of good and evil toward their character development. So, the second problem will be analyzed by using theory of the character development. The third chapter is method of research. The first is research design. This study applied qualitative method. Shang in 2002 defines qualitative research as a form of systematic empirical inquiry into meaning. It means that a qualitative research, the researcher try to understand how others make sense of their experience. The writer chooses this method because this research deals with social issues happen in society and human behavior. And then the data and the source of data. The data of this study are words, sentences, and dialogues of the novel by Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, which shows the coexistence of good and evil. The source of data is Harper Lee's novel To Kill a Mockingbird, published by J.B. Lippincott and Co. in Philadelphia in 1960, and it contains 281 pages. To Kill a Mockingbird has become a classic of modern American literature and winning the Pulitzer Prize. Its primary themes involve racial injustice and the destruction of innocence. The book is widely taught in schools in the United States with lessons that emphasize tolerance and decry prejudice. The book was adapted into an Academy Award-winning film in 1962, directed by Robert Mulligan. Since 1990, a play based on the novel has been performed annually in Harper Lee's hometown. In 2006, British librarians ranked the book ahead of the Bible as one every adult should read before they die. The story is about Scout and Jem, children of a lawyer, Atticus Finch, who witness how justice works in their neighborhood. Atticus is appointed to defend an innocent black man, Tom Robinson, who has been accused of raping a white woman. Even though there is no evidence, the judge still penalizes him. Scout and Jem try to defend the truth because everyone is against them. Atticus is hopeful that he can get the verdict overturned, but Tom is shot and killed while trying to escape from prison. To Kill a Mockingbird was Lee's only published book until Go Set a Watchman was published in 2015. Lee continued to respond to her work's impact until her death in 2016, although she had refused any personal publicity for herself or the novel since 1964. And then the technique of data collecting. The technique of collecting data in this research is library research because of data are in the form of written text. Bowen in 2009 states that document analysis is a form of qualitative research in which documents are interpreted by the researcher to give voice and meaning around the assessment topic. And then the technique of data analysis. The first is domain analysis. In this step, the writer reads the novel To Kill a Mockingbird. After that, the writer collects, separate, and distinguish which one is considered as data. The data are all in the phrases, clauses, and sentences. And then taxonomy analysis. In this step, the writer categorizes all the data which data had that portrayed the coexistence of good and evil in Scott and James' perspective, and which data show the influence of Scott and James' perspective of coexistence of good and evil towards their character development. And then the third is componential analysis. In this step, the writer analyzes and explains why the phrase, clauses, and sentences are considered as the data to answer the research equation below. The first is how is the coexistence of good and evil portrayed to Scott and James' perspective in Harper To Kill a Mockingbird? And then the second is how does Scott and James' perspective of the coexistence of good and evil influence their character development? And then the fourth is cultural theme analysis. In this step, the data are associated with related theory which explained before. In analyzing the problems, the theories and approaches are used. There are three approaches used to conduct this research. There are sociological approach, psychological approach, and post-structuralism approach. The first approach is sociological approach. In five approaches of literary criticism, Scott in 1963 claimed that sociological approach give one understanding that art's relations to the society are vitally important and that the investigation of this relationship organized and deepens one's response to a work of art. It means that sociological approach is the suitable approach to analyze social problem. In this research, the sociological approach used to analyze the coexistence of good and evil in Scott's and James' perspective. And then the second approach is psychological approach. According to Rohberger and Woods Jr. in 1971, the psychological approach is an approach that uses psychological theory to explain human motivation, personality, and behavior written in literary objects. Since psychological approach has many varieties, Erickson's theory about the specific psychosocial aspect is chosen to analyze data because the study dealt with psychological aspects in human thought and behavior. This theory considered to be the most appropriate approach to analyze Scott's and James' character development influenced by the coexistence of good and evil. The third is post-structuralism approach. Hearst in 1998 states that the post-structuralism approach is to resist extremes and adopt a theoretical attitude that accommodates complexity. Post-structuralism identifies a way of theorizing that belongs equally to literary theory, the philosophy, and critical theory. In this research, post-structuralism approach is used to analyze how Scott's and James' perspective toward good and evil changed. It is influenced by the situation that happened in their neighborhood. And then the fourth chapter is finding and discussion. You can see the quotation. The situation is James tell his dad Atticus that Boo Radley is not a bad person like what people in the neighborhood said. He is neighbor who live on the same street as the Finch family, a recluse who only comes out at night, Boo becomes a receptacle for the town's fear and superstitions. Children, including Jem and Scout, make up strange and horrific stories about Boo, informed by the gossip of the adults. However, as the story progresses, both of them realize that Boo is the good person. As in post-structuralism, people experience only limited aspects of the world, and some of what we experience is based on falsehood embedded in some of the discourse learned. We have learned. Scout and Jem assume that Boo Radley is a bad person based on people's story, but then they themselves witness that he is a good person. Then the second is about the influence of Scout and Jem's perspective of good and evil towards their character's development. The first stage is infancy, and then in infancy, Erikson believed that this stage started from birth up to 18 months. So, in this stage, Jem and Scout are loved by their mother. Before, she was passed away when Jem was 2 years old. Because of love and affection that their mother gives to them, Scout and Jem can develop a sense of trust to the world. It can be proven from the statement you can see it yourself, and then it also shows this, that Scout trusts Jem that he will always tell her about their mother whenever Scout asks. And then the second stage is early childhood. Scout has a good sense of independence. She develops the sense of independence from a very young age, since her mother has already passed away when she was 2. And then Scout and Jem go to school by themselves without sent by their father or Calpurnia, their housekeeper. It can be seen from the statement. You can see it yourself. And then the third stage is preschool. In this stage starts around age 3 and continuing to age 5. The primary feature involves the child regularly interacting with other children at school. And then the story starts when Scout is 5 years old. On summer, she plays drama with Jem and Dale. Playing drama is one of the activities that increase Scout's motor activity, language, and imagination. Then the quotation is Scout telling the reader about how they play drama. And then the last stage is the school age. This stage happens from about the age 6 until 8. And then teacher begin to take an important role in the children's lives. So long before she entered school, Scout is good at writing and reading thanks to the upbringing of her father. This condition makes Scout set her expectation of school too high. In the first day of school, Scout has already felt upset because her teacher, Miss Caroline, tells her that it cannot be accepted to write and read magazine clearly in the first grade. Because of that, Scout really feels discouraged. She loses her passion to go to school. She even tells her father not to send her to school. Ericus understands the daughter problem, so he tells Scott to look the problem from different point of view, not only from her own, since she is very fussy asking not to go to school. The things that has the biggest influence for Scout's and Jem's character development is when they witness how bad the discrimination toward black people in her neighborhood. When they join Calpurnia to her church, which is a church for black people, they know that the the church is also used by the white man to be a place to gamble. It shows the highest level of racism because it related to one's religion. Group of people do gambling in other groups' holy place. But through some events that Scout and James experience, they realize that right or wrong cannot be judged only with skin color. Scouts successfully pass this stage positively with Jem and understand how to behave in such a diverse neighborhood. And then the last chapter is conclusion. So there are two problems found out in To Kill a Mockingbird dealing with the coexistence of good and evil. The first is the coexistence of good and evil portrayed in the character's perspective. Scout and James shows that at first they have wrong perspective on which one is good and which one is bad. However, as time goes by, they learn and find the good and evil itself. And then the second problem is the influence of Scout's and James' perspective of good and evil towards their character development. Scout and James' character development develops well in every stages from they were born until their school ages. Their parents take an important role in their character development. Scout and Jim become independent since their mother has already passed away when they were still in young age. However, Scout's school age make her once feel upset because there are many things that she cannot do at school. Scout also start to question about good and evil that makes her confused. Racism toward black people that they witness bring them to realize what happened with the world they live. Also, wise guidance from ethicists help them to understand on how to behave fairly in the society. So that's all my presentation about the coexistence of good and evil in Harper List to Kill a Mockingbird. You can ask questions in the forum. Thank you for your attention and goodbye. Good morning.